This is Fort Union, and for nearly 4 decades, it was the beating heart of frontier defense, a commercial hub on the legendary Santa Fe Trail, and home to thousands of soldiers who shaped the destiny of the West. Today, we're exploring Fort Union National Monument, where the ghosts of America's frontier past still echo through crumbling adobe walls and grass-covered parade grounds. When Colonel Edwin Sumner established the first fort in July 1851, it was a crude affair, log cabins and earthworks thrown together quickly to address a critical problem. The United States had just acquired New Mexico through the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo, and the region was in chaos. Apache and Comanche raids threatened settlers, the Santa Fe Trail needed protection, and the Army needed a central supply depot to support far-flung outposts across the Southwest. Sumner chose this location strategically. It sat near the junction where the mountain and Cimarron routes of the Santa Fe Trail converged, giving the Army control over the lifeline that connected Missouri to Santa Fe and beyond. Water from nearby Wolf Creek kept the garrison supplied. But here's what makes Fort Union truly unique. It's actually 3 forts in one. That first log fort served until 1861, when Confederate forces threatened to invade New Mexico during the Civil War. A second, star-shaped earthwork fort was hastily constructed. You can still see its distinctive angular walls rising from the prairie today. Then, after the Confederate threat ended, the Army built the third and final fort between 1863 and 1869, creating the massive territorial-style adobe complex whose ruins dominate the landscape. What set Fort Union apart from every other military post in the region was its role as the primary supply depot for the entire Southwest. At its peak, Fort Union stored over 5 million pounds of supplies. From here, massive freight convoys departed regularly. The fort employed hundreds of civilian workers. It was essentially a small city with its own hospital, bakery, brewery, and mechanics shops. Fort Union's military significance reached its zenith during the Civil War. In March 1862, Confederate forces from Texas marched into New Mexico, dreaming of capturing Colorado's gold fields and opening a route to California. They won initial victories, and suddenly Fort Union, with its massive stores of weapons and supplies, became the prize that could decide the entire campaign. The Union Army mobilized everything they had. Colorado volunteers force-marched through mountain snow to reinforce Fort Union. On March 26 to 28, 1862, Union and Confederate forces clashed at Glorieta Pass, just 90 miles from the fort. When Union forces destroyed the Confederate supply train, the campaign collapsed. It was the Gettysburg of the West, and Fort Union's resources made victory possible. After the Civil War, Fort Union's mission shifted. Soldiers stationed here participated in campaigns against Apache and Comanche peoples. The fort became a staging ground for military actions that would ultimately confine indigenous peoples to reservations, fundamentally transforming the Southwest. One unique aspect of Fort Union was its Buffalo Soldiers, African-American troops who served with distinction despite facing discrimination and harsh conditions. The 9th and 10th Cavalry regiments rotated through Fort Union, and their contributions to frontier defense were invaluable. By the 1880s, the world was changing. Railroads replaced wagon trains, making Fort Union's role as a supply depot obsolete. The Indian Wars were winding down, reducing the need for military presence. In 1891, the Army abandoned Fort Union and the prairie began to reclaim it. For decades, the ruins stood silent. Adobe walls melted in the rain, wooden structures collapsed, locals salvaged building materials. The fort seemed destined to disappear entirely. People recognized that Fort Union represented something irreplaceable, a tangible connection to the Santa Fe Trail, frontier military life, and the transformation of the American West. In 1954, Fort Union became a national monument, preserving these ruins for future generations. The ruins of the third fort stretch across the landscape: officers' quarters, enlisted men's barracks, the hospital, warehouses, all in various states of preservation, gradually returning to the earth. It reminds us that the West wasn't won by lone cowboys and gunslingers, but by massive military and commercial operations, by soldiers from diverse backgrounds, and by the displacement of indigenous peoples whose presence here stretched back centuries. The next time you're traveling through northeastern New Mexico, take the detour to Fort Union, where history hasn't been restored, it's been preserved exactly as time left it, powerful and haunting in its decay.